All right, folks, here we are again, SFL.media, right here out of South Florida. You're with PJZNY, Patrick, and Mr. Josh W. I am Joshua. We're going to kick around a few things today. It's probably been, I don't want to say a slow news cycle, but because it's never really slow, but we're going to touch on a few things today. But we're going to start off with something that's in Patrick's wheelhouse, and he's going to lead us through a very, very intelligent discussion about UFOs, aliens, space creatures. I guess there's all these different type of nomenclatures for this now, but it's become very topical. And the reason why we're going to do this podcast is because people are going missing, and one turned to four, four turned to five, five turned to 11. And it still keeps happening, and I don't think it's going to stop at 11. So I'm going to let Pat speak on this because he's done a tremendous deep dive. He did a really great article that you can also find on the website. I would implore anybody to read, and it's a long form article, so it goes in very, very deep. But I'm going to let Patrick speak on the phenomenon and what he believes of what these aliens really are. Are they here? Are they coming? Are we in danger? I'll let you, you tell us.
Okay, so I wrote an article called The Disclosure, preparing everyone for the disclosure, kind of a guide to the upcoming disclosure. And so to do that, I had to dive in farther than I normally dive in, even for our political articles, because you really have to carve through a lot of information online and find out kind of like what's bullshit, what's probable, what is the government paid for, what are the government programs doing in this area, what do we know, what do we not know. And so what I can basically whittle it down to is I think there's four sections that people need to be prepared for when it comes to alien disclosure, discussing aliens intelligently. And it basically goes like this. One is the government programs. There's a ton of government programs and there's billions of dollars that have been spent, and some of those receipts are coming out now. So that's one thing. Then two, you have contact and transport. And that means contact with aliens, first, like sending radio signals out and things like that. And, alien vehicles coming and going, us maybe having some alien vehicles that we're reverse engineering, things of that. Then you also have beings, which is beings that they may or may not have made contact with, or beings that may be able to visit us and stay a while and we not notice them, things of that nature. And then fourth, which seems like it would be where you would start, but I think it's actually where you end in this discussion, and that's theories. There is a lot of wild theories about why some of this stuff is happening and what the point of these contacts may or may not be. And that gets into some really fascinating stuff. So those are the four things that I think are most important about this subject. And then we can dive into all the different sections, obviously.
So where would you want to lead off? Do you want to go like chronologically? What you
I would just like to run down some program stuff with you guys real quick. And I'm going to read it off my notes here, okay?
The first thing is programs. You're about to explain.
Yeah, I want to get the timing right on this. So first you have the legacy era programs, and those are 1947 to 2000. And these are the foundational programs where the initial technology was seized, hidden, privatized. You're talking about like back with your Roswell, things of that nature, okay? Then after that, you had another one that was called Project Moondust and Blue Fly. And this is basically where they move from like, hey, what's happening here into active recovery of stuff, right? And so this was your Cold War era field recovery and extraction teams. So Moondust would track this stuff, and Blue Fly was a team that would go out and get the stuff that crashed. And this is all theoretical, right? We're dealing in the realms of theoretical. I'm not guaranteeing any of this is true. I'm saying this is likely to be true. This seems to be what's happening, okay? And one of those main crashes that comes up a lot is in Kingsman, Arizona. And that one basically was handled by the Moondust Blue Fly team. And we can get back to that Kingsley, Arizona crash because supposedly there was a living being recovered from that crash. That's what they say. Another one was Project Aquarius. Project Aquarius, you'll hear a lot. That's the umbrella program that kind of like oversaw all these little sub-programs in this area, okay? Then in the 1980s to 2012, the programs kind of moved and they started to focus on quantum bridge era, let's call it. And this is the era where they're starting to contact, right? They're starting to reach out to other planets where they may have made contact and things of that nature. And these programs focused on the physics of portals and the first attempts to contact known alien civilizations. Because as one of the rumor goes online, and as you dive into this, is that they've had 2 or 3 different aliens that have survived these crashes or that have shown up and worked with the US, right? And each one of these aliens has they've learned different things from them. But one of them, supposedly one of the early ones, was able to use US technology and basically contact his home planet. And so we had that contact going on for a while. And they say one of their beings actually lived out the rest of his days here, stayed here 10 or 20 years, and actually died at Area 51, is what they say, which is fascinating to even just discuss. Okay, then he had another project right here, the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program. And this is the program that obviously everyone can surmise the US government would have, which is turning alien technology into weapons. Okay, now we get into the active disclosure era, where we are now, 2022 to 2026. And this is basically the military and the military industrial complex and the US government starting to release some of this information. And there's also a problem where there's cell phones now. There's new radar on the fighter jets. It was becoming harder for the government to contain this, and they started to go into kind of releasing small amounts of information, and there's been some hearings on it. And it seems like they're starting to prep the US people for bigger disclosures. And we have a disclosure date that's been set, which is about 180 days. And then they also have registered aliens.gov, which is pretty telling in of itself.
That was recent, correct?
Yep. And that was Trump. So basically, Trump came in and he says you have 180 days. And the first disclosure after 180 days is they have to give us all the secret programs list, because it's like top secret, super duper 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 top secret. And there's like all these layers to what they call, like, the top layers are like undisclosed programs. So like even people don't know about it. Like maybe 2 or 3 people in Congress know about it, and they're briefed, and then the rest of Congress doesn't even know about it. The president may or may not even know about it. So one of the first ways to wrangle in this kind of underground alien protective force that's in our government that's kind of keeping all of these secrets was to force them to at least disclose the different levels. Like, let's start by you give us the list of the levels so we know what we're dealing with. And the first disclosures have to do with levels and documents and things like that are supposed to be coming out. Now, what's really crazy about that stuff too is you can get into now like some of the other information, like that's the programs, and then they have a lot of different crafts that have been seen. And we've all seen the Tic Tac video. That's very popular, which like a military aircraft saw the Tic Tac video go around. But they also have seen a gimbal, which is a rotating sphere of a vehicle that's rotating. And they've also seen a cube in a sphere. And a lot of the scientists and different people around these things say that the sphere is like that's like your warp drive. It's like a gravitational kind of bubble that these things are in. And that's what allows them to go to water, move so fast, move at speeds that would, kill somebody living inside of it. But they're inside this bubble, so they're not affected. And that's what allows them to do it, supposedly. So, you get into a lot of stuff. There was also a bell that they found. There was a bell that was found and it had hieroglyphics all over it. And that was found back by Mussolini's government. And so some of this stuff goes back a long time. So we're not just talking about modern alien stuff. There's some alien stuff that they say they've dug up in archaeological digs and things of that nature. So this has been going on for a long period of time. And if you think about, humans, it's kind of silly to think that we would be the first civilization in the universe, right? How big the universe is. So there's probably civilizations that are a lot older than us, and they may have been visiting this planet for a long time. So that's kind of like your first dent into where we are, right? How you staying with me so far?
I am. I actually formulated some questions. I don't know if you're sticking to a kind of outline that you have, but can I interject some questions for you?
Let's do it, brother.
Okay, so are aliens time travelers?
So the way that they say it is both. So there's different groups of aliens, and they say that there may be I've read that there may be up to 46 different kinds. That sounds like a stretch, but there is in writing from, government agencies, different things, whistleblowers, 3 or 4 solid different types of aliens. And one of them is people from the future. And so there's a lot of talk about P45s or P52s. And what that means is present time plus 45,000 years, present time plus 52,000 years. So some of these beings that have come back and helped us or worked with us or spoke to us are beings that are us from the future. And so what they say basically, and this is going to get really wild, folks. So what they say, and if you remember the young lady who was a scientist, and she was on a hike with her friends, and she was deep in this like alien stuff with the government, and then she just disappeared on the hike. Do you remember her? Well, she was doing
the last ones that have gone missing.
And she was starting to talk about a lot of this stuff. And she has a podcast, and we posted it on SFL Media Instagram. You can see where she started talking about P42s and P52s. And shortly after that, she disappeared. So I don't know if that's related. You can take from it what you want. But she was hiking with her friends. They turned around and she was gone. It's very hard to make someone just disappear off of a hike with their friends, So it's
and to not make a peep and the person not even see them. I
Yeah,
have another
seems like
question.
more than she just fell. And so let me build on this for a second, though, Trees.
Uh-huh.
So basically, what they say is that the P-52s and the P-42 that came back, they came back in time, and traveling through space is traveling through time. So theoretically, they figured this out 52,000 years from now, and they came back, and they look like the gray aliens that you picture in TV and movies. And the reason that they say that they're the gray aliens is because basically, in the not too distant future from now, something cataclysmic happens and it's unavoidable. And what ends up happening is it sends some people underground to live in their basically like the bunkers that they've created. And some people survive above ground just by luck, whatever is about to happen, a nuclear war or whatever. And then after that, basically the people that lived underground for thousands and thousands of years because the environment was ruined, let's say by a nuclear war or something like that, they became the gray aliens. So they have the big eyes because they need to see where it's dimmer and dark. They have the hairless bodies and all that because they're the ones that have been living underground. And there seems to be in the future, according to these stories, is that basically the above ground people that survive clearly don't get along with the bunker people. And so that's like a riff in the future. And they've come back to try to stop the cataclysmic event that sends them underground. That's the story. And one of them that came back is supposedly the person who gave us, or the being that gave us fiber optics. And so, as some of these government programs go, and there's a government program about this, and I'll find the name for it. But here, this is really diving down the rabbit hole. So, let me give you an example here. So this is what they say. The little grays, the little gray aliens are kind of like biological suits. They're avatars. So if you're an advanced civilization, you create these biological avatars and you send them out into the universe because they can travel far, far, far places. And then they could do the research, look for you. You could control them with, AI remotely or maybe telepathically, depending on how smart you are. And so that's what the little grays are. So we're talking about like the life-size grays here. And there was one of them that came back supposedly. So they call this one J-Rod. It's very famous if you've heard these things. And so J-Rod is from the program Looking Glass and Project Aquarius. Okay. He is identified by whistleblower Dan Bursch as a human descendant from roughly 52,000 years in the future. So he's the P-52. Physical profile: large dark eyes, skin that appears insect-like due to future genetic degenerative disease. J-Rod is part of a knowledge exchange program. The logic that they aren't from another planet but are time refugees attempting to fix a catastrophic event in their past. What to expect at disclosure is possibly information of J-Rod or the timeline stabilization or the things that are going to happen in the future if the government really wanted to be forthcoming and if this is true. And the story behind J-Rod, it's just so wild. It basically goes that he showed up as a time traveler and gave us all this information, and in exchange gave us fiber optics and other stuff, and stayed here for basically a good amount of time living on Area 52, or area was it Area 51 or Area 52, staying on the base. And then they basically put him in a portal and sent him back after a good amount of time. And that gets into one of the other things here, which is Project Looking Glass, and why he's covered under Project Looking Glass, which is where there is basically portals and ways that the government has started to do to manipulate gravity, to manipulate time, to manipulate travel. And so some of these documents say that there's 5 to 7 different places on the Earth where basically the electromagnetic field is thin enough that beings can come and go. And they call these stargates. And if you look, there's some of them in the Middle East and different places, and they're all by places where the US has bases.
Hmm.
So some people make the argument that these bases are in place to protect these areas. You know what I mean? And according to this guy, Dr. Dan Bursch was a biologist. So this is not he's a leading biologist. They came to him and they said, look, we have this being here. He's on the Air Force base. We have him in special containment area, but his skin's not good. We need you to look at it. And he came in to basically look at J-Rod and look after him and make sure that he stays healthy and make sure that everything, goes copacetic with his housing here. And so he describes in depth the suit that he would have to put in. He'd have to go to an area that was in between where the humans were, and it's like mostly oxygen, and into this chamber which was better suited for J-Rod. And he has all of this inside information on basically taking care of this alien and getting in and getting out. And if you watch his interviews, they're wildly in depth. So it's amazing to kind of like think that a doctor that's this prominent in his field would go out on a limb like this and give interviews that are wildly in depth, wildly descriptive, that clearly you can see he's just talking off the cuff. He's not making this stuff up. It doesn't seem, unless he's a very intelligent person. So that's just one example, of the rabbit hole that you go down with this alien stuff. I mean, are you telling me that the government has a time refugee from the future that stayed with us, gave us technology in exchange for helping him out with some stuff that they needed for the future, which is basically, I guess they came back to get DNA that wasn't fucking affected by the cataclysmic event or whatever that happens in the future. Does that make sense? I know
Um,
it's insane.
yeah, it's definitely a lot to swallow. Um, Here's another question for you: are they aliens or are they demons? And before you answer that, the interesting thing was when I think it was JD Vance that was recently asked this question, and he didn't go all the way, but he was of the belief that they're demons. I know that a lot of very religious Christians seem to think that these are fallen angels or demons. So there is an interesting thing. What's linear is that there seems to be a belief that these things exist, but there's maybe a school of thought that these are what we call aliens or creatures from outer space or what have you. And then there's seems to be a religious school of thought that these are actually demons. And before you answer that, I want you to also include how Sam Altman is trying to summons a demon, maybe an alien, through AI. And does this all tie in together?
It does tie in together. If you start going down the AI rabbit hole, inevitably there's religious overlap, right? There's religious people claiming angels, claiming devils, things of that nature. And JD Vance is a new Catholic. I think he became a Catholic like a year or two ago, or whatever. So maybe he's like vested in kind of like associating himself with the religious side of things. But
Right.
what I can tell you is from what I read is it seems like the scientific stuff is more compelling to me. It's interesting because you're like, well, what if this is exaggeration? What if this is like alliteration? What if this is like sci-fi writers have taken this and like pulled it, past like what it really is, And when you look at it, it's just really not like that. It's a lot of different whistleblowers over a period of years. It's government receipts that have come out and just different things that have slipped from different politicians. And I think that you're starting to see that a lot of this stuff is very true. And it's going to be interesting. Just the real question isn't whether or not they're aliens anymore. The question is, have we been contacted? Are they in contact now? Have we had beings here that are alive that we've been able to like, correspond with and things of that nature? I mean, those are the real questions now. Whether or not it's demons or angels and stuff like that, I think that there's some stuff in these files that lead to be like demons or like angels. But I think when you unwind the full story, it's slightly different than a religious story. And let me give you an example. They don't just think that there's aliens coming here and there's people coming from the past and the future. They also think that there's people coming from other dimensions. And what they mean is we live in a three-dimensional world, and there could be a fourth, fifth, they think up to seven dimensions, right? And it seems like there's a group of people that they call the Nordics, which kind of look like us. They're like blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like picture a really great-looking human that doesn't age as fast as we will. That's what they say they are, and they can kind of mix in with us. And they don't really do much to change our situation, but they seem to pop in and out in important areas, war zones, nuclear sites, things of this nature. It's been reported that there may have been contact with them at one of the Air Force bases. And it seems to be that these people are there to kind of make sure that we don't just blow up the place. They're not really trying to steer what we do as much as just make sure that the guardrails stay on. People said, compare it to like a chaotic backyard. That's kind of where we live. We're not really in control of the house like we thought we were. We really live in the chaotic backyard, but there's beings in the house. We can't see the house, but there's beings in the house. They're very smart, and they're watching what we do in the backyard. And they don't really care what we do, if we build a tree house, if we cut the yard, whatever, but they make sure we don't burn the fucking backyard down. And that seems to be very interesting. And I think that's part of disclosure that really worries them. That's just one of the many things, which is like, what do people do when they find out that there's smarter beings among us, mixing in and out, coming in and out of our environment, making sure that our nukes don't go off, they're visiting war zones and things of that nature? What do people think when you realize that your government is almost obsolete, that there's a greater government government out there that you don't really have contact with that has much more control, that could take you out like that. I mean, what do people do with that information? And then also, what do people do with the information that has been hidden from them for so long? I mean, I think the government's in a real pickle now because of how far they've taken this stuff, and they're going to have a real hard time explaining it if it really is as wild as some of us believe it to be.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've got a couple more questions, but I can wrap two of them into one. We're about 20 minutes on this. I don't know how much longer.
Let's go, man. I got more. I'm just tapping the iceberg here, buddy.
Okay, so
I got 20 more minutes for you.
Okay, well, I know we have a couple of other subjects we wanted to do, but that's fine. So my question, I'm going to tie both of them together in, is, and you bringing up the blondes, the Nordics, and this might make this easy for you to answer. So that the question is, do you think that we currently live amongst these beings, whether they're fully one of these beings, whether they have oh, I'm drawing a blank on the word, but procreated with us in some way, that they're part alien, part human, and if you do believe that we're living amongst them, are they friendly? Are some friendly and some not friendly? Some want to do harm, some want to help. What's your opinions on, again, whether we live amongst them and whether they're friendly or not?
I believe clearly they're friendly. I believe we live amongst them. I don't know if we've procreated with them. That's a stretch, but it is something that's said a lot. So it's possible in this world. But look, if you're going to believe that alien craft visit here, and that's clear at this point, alien craft definitely visit here, right? We have lots of videos. We're talking about our smartest scientists and pilots and stuff believe this stuff. So if they're visiting here, are you going to say that they're not interacting with us? I mean, of course they are on some level. You know what I mean? And you know what's interesting? The government has a lot of information about this. They've been lying to us about this for years. They know the spots where the aliens are. So they've tracked into like deep ocean, for instance. One of them is like the Puerto Rico Trench. There's a lot of action there. One of them is in Fort Lauderdale, right off of the Fort Lauderdale coast where I live. There's a ton of action there. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see private jets with green saucers flying by them, yachts with things under the water. So there's a lot of action around Fort Lauderdale. And the government has basically narrowed it down to like X amount of sites where they believe this happens, right? So if it's so common that the government knows where it's happening and how often and whatnot, you would have to think that there's some interaction, maybe with our government, maybe with us from a level of they're just watching everything in some digital sort of way. Another thing that the government found was like an orb type thing that was floating in a very windy area, and it was an advanced sensor, they say. So they found advanced sensors as well. So it's very interesting. They found craft. They have definitely found beings that are dead. There's argument whether or not they found alive beings, but I believe that to be true. And they have found sensors that have been placed out to record, environmental things that are happening. So
I
that's
noticed. Go
all
ahead. I'm
going
sorry.
on. Go ahead.
I noticed that when researching some of this myself, that for some reason over the last few years, the term UFO kind of disappeared, and they started using the term UAP. UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. I don't know what the true difference, other than from UFO, Unidentified Flying Object, how they're two different. But why I'm bringing this up is that I want you to comment on, because you've already discussed this a little bit in some of what you said. What I've come to learn is a large amount of these are not flying above us where we could see them and perhaps record them. But a lot of them seem to be below us in the water, where we can't see them. And you had talked about them being in some sort of like anti-gravitational pod and things like that. So I'd like you to comment on the fact of what do you think is going on. And, remember this, the globe is 75% water, maybe give or take a percentage. That's a lot of water for all the land and people. 75% of these things can be traveling massive, massive oceans all over the place. Are they in the water?
They're 100% in the water. They're 100% in the water. There is Navy admirals that have gone on the record and told people, investigators, that they're in the water. It's happening. There is supposedly there was a Navy ship going, and a 300-foot alien ship went below them in the water, and they tracked it. They have all the data on it or whatever. We're talking about a 300-foot. We don't have anything that can travel underwater. It was going 200 miles an hour, and it's 300-foot, size of a football field underwater. And now they also say, as part of one of the hearings, now this was testified hearing, this is like under oath, testified by a whistleblower that the government, US government, has one of these giant crafts, a partial one, like one that crashed or was damaged or they shot down or whatever. Like they've got a piece of one of these. Now, here's what really gets crazy. They can be coming and going in and out of the water. There's that too. But other researchers and suggestions have been thrown out there that what if they just evolved underwater? We've only tracked like 2% of the ocean floor or something. You could have another being just like us that's sophisticated that was either here before us and has been evolved underwater the whole time, right? Or a being from outer space that's coming down and just camping underwater because they can and they know that we're not going to find them there, right? So it's all very interesting. And it also plays into the Nordics, which some people say are the Nordics just the beings that are living like in our oceans because they can and, popping out to do different things or whatever. So it's very interesting when you get to the who they are and why they are in the water. But if they are in the water, that's closed. That is a deal. They are in the water 100%. That's for sure.
What is your theory of one of the species that I've always heard about were the giants? They seem to have found archaeologically bones and proof that there were some sort of beings that were 12 feet tall, you know. I think where we hear about in the Bible of David and Goliath, that somehow, some way, Goliath was a giant. The theory, I think it's Greek mythology, if I'm not mistaken, but the whole theory of the Cyclops, which was this giant being with the one eye. There's a school of thought that some of the things that have been erected, like the pyramids, could only have been done by a giant being, that there's just no way man, at least what we know as human man, could harness the power to create those. There's just no way, not with levees, not with levers, not with any pulleys, nothing. There's no way to get those rocks and do what they did. Do you think that there's some sort of alien race that once lived and that they're kind of human-like as far as their
Okay.
the way they look?
This is a great
giants existed.
This is a great conversation here because so there's my article, and this is right on the left of my article, and I do know something about this subject. It's not covered in my article, but we're going to go here anyway because I know something about it. So there have been military reports of them basically like getting called to a scene where they went down in these holes that they had found, and in the holes was a giant, and they killed him. And basically the people that snitched on it were the military that had to come in with the giant planes and basically take these guys out, like cargo planes, to like take the body out. And now the cargo plane guys are supposedly the ones that like let the story fly to the public, right? So there is military rumor or military lore around occasionally things to do with giants, right? Now, if we're thinking aliens aren't all going to be smaller than us. Some are going to be our size, some are going to be taller, right? That just makes perfect sense. Go to the bottom of the ocean. Look how weird things look there. That's on our planet. Imagine how weird they get off of our planet, right? And so I do believe it is possible that there's some giants on there. Now, what you're talking on with the pyramids, it's interesting because the pyramids are much older than even ancient Egypt. Like by the time Cleopatra lived, the pyramids were already ancient at that time. And I don't think people realize that. Like the pyramids outdate like most of like, what was happening in Egypt when it was like really big. So the pyramids are really, they're back there. And as the story goes, the rumor goes, and you're talking about the Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki were supposedly live in a few light years away. They needed to come to Earth to mine some stuff to help their environment, help their planet. They came to Earth and they're supposed to be mining this stuff. And what they did is they took some DNA and they spliced it into basically the humans. And that's what divided us from the apes and all the other animals and everything on us, this planet. And there's a thing, if you look in human biology, we can track like ourselves from the cavemen all the way up, but there's a period there where we had basically like an enlightenment, like an intellectual revolution, and the scientists cannot really figure out how that happened or why. They're not sure if it's just from us being social and using tools and it just broke out, or did something like this happen? And so the story goes, Anunnaki come here, they need to mine. There's these, cavemen type people here. So they splice DNA in to make them a little smarter so that they can help them mine. And then they leave because they were never supposed to mess with the indigenous people on this planet. They're supposed to leave it alone. And the government pulls them back. And then maybe they're monitoring us on some level still because they feel a sense of responsibility, maybe. So that is an internet rumor out there. It's a big rumor. It's a huge one. It's been covered on a lot of different things. The Anunnaki is a very popular subject, and it really gets into the idea of human life was kind of not seeded here, but it was given a kickstart in the intelligence department, and that's what gave us the head start on everything else on the planet. And that's also, it gets into why our babies are so fragile. It gets into why we get sunburned and all the other animals on the planet don't get sunburned here, and all this other stuff, because some of the DNA that they spliced with us was meant for a different environment where it wasn't as bright and wasn't as harsh, and so on and so on and so on.
That's an interesting fact.
And I have another fascinating theory I'll get to at the end of this one too that rubs up against this one. But the Anunnaki itself is a wonderful rabbit hole. I encourage anyone to go on
Recently,
online.
a number of scientists, some tied to defense or space sectors, have gone missing or died, which has raised concerns and led to investigations by agencies like the FBI and the House.
There we go.
Well, let's talk about those now.
So my final question, and then you can wrap it up with what you've got. We started off with this question. Why are all these scientists going missing or dying? What's going on here?
The government's killing them. That's what I believe from my heart, from researching this story, from following this for a long time, from being deeply interested into this stuff. We can imagine that if you're into a government secret program that they tell you, hey, this is a life or death thing. You can't spill these secrets. These are national security secrets. These are some of the United States' most deeply coveted secrets, and you can't let these out. And so if you look at the guys that have died over like the last 20 years, they're like intelligence officials that started to be loose ends. Like one guy was becoming a little bit of an alcoholic. What do alcoholics do? They sit at the bar, they talk to their buddy, they tell them about their work, they tell them about the aliens they fucked with and the spaceship and shit like that. Boom, that guy goes out. Then you had the general that everybody's talking about. His wife is also like a government chemist or something. She makes an ice cold 911 call. Like she barely even cares. Like she almost understands what's happening, or maybe called him into the higher ups. And he was having mental breaks. He was having moments of fogginess, different stuff. I'm not sure if it was something that was being done to him or if he was just aging, but I think he also became a bit of a loose cannon and the government came for him. And then there's also the girl who we were talking about. She was starting to do podcasts and spill the secrets, and then she disappeared. So to me, there's a theory out there that they're collecting all of these. There's two theories right now, right? One theory is that another government is either killing our scientists like Iran to get back at us for killing their scientists, or it's like China or something and they're abducting our scientists to get the secrets, right? That's one of the theories. The other theory is that our government is grabbing these guys because they need them to put together a defense for either what's going to happen, the cataclysm that's coming our way, or to just get ready for disclosure or to help them on like this secret program, right? I think both of those are bullshit. I think if you look at these people, they're older people, they're loose cannons, they're not the people at the peak of their industries, but they're people with insider information. And I think the government felt they were loose cannons, and I think the government killed them. I think that the government knows the disclosure is coming, but the last thing these defense contractors want is disclosure because they've been using this technology to make billions, and the people that gate guard it, they feel like they're smarter than everybody else. They don't want this stuff disclosed, and I feel like they're going around right now before disclosure finally hits and killing up all the loose ends, because the people that are dying now would be the first people that would be on the talk shows telling all the secrets, and they don't want any part of that, so they're icing these people before disclosure comes to shut them the fuck up. And they probably feel like the reason we have to have disclosure is because these people ran their mouth, and so they're double fucking pissed at them. So I think if you're telling me a scientist if a little tiny person gets murdered in an insignificant human, we investigate it to the hilt. We're a very litigious legal country in that fashion. So you're telling me top scientists are dying all over and they're not being investigated? Just now, the other day, like 2 days ago, the FBI says, hey, we're going to take this as a national security threat. I don't believe that. They didn't care because they know it's our government killing these people, and they're only putting together a sham investigation now because everyone's writing articles left and right like, where the fuck are our top scientists? So that's what I think.
I think it's also one of those things where you're told, leave this alone, don't touch this. These people are going missing, and you'll fucking go missing too if you keep touching this, and that's always been a thing, whether it's CIA, NSA, whatever it is that's protecting these secrets. There's a reason why this is happening, and I don't think anybody who's going to touch it and question it too much is doing themselves a service. But, that's to be determined.
No, I agree with you. I think that's how it's always been. If one of these secrets is true, if they have an alien, if they have a ship, if they have any little thing, if they even have just a tiny sphere that they've recovered, they would kill to protect that secret.
Now, there is a House oversight panel. And again, I think a lot of times this is smoke and mirrors. They hold a panel, they show it on C-SPAN, and then nothing goes anywhere. But they said, look, we did something here. We asked a million questions or whatever. But that seems where sometimes it lives and
Some of them
dies
have come
there.
out now, though, and they've said that if we knew what the actual truth was, that it would unhinge society. Like people would freak the fuck out. And so I think that, so I mean, let me just take a step back here. So with most of these government programs, okay, I think it's very likely that they've crashed here. I think it's very likely that we have human biologics and that we have aircraft because that was testified under oath. Okay, so nobody wants to go to prison. Multiple people testifying under oath. I tend to believe that. Now, did they have live beings? I think if you look back on all of the stuff that's come out and this money spent on these programs and the whistleblowers and different things like that, I think they probably likely had live beings. They may have had contact with live beings. I think the universe is probably a very busy place and people have been coming for a long time. And I think it's also much more diverse. The world is not this black and white world that we grew up in. There's interdimensional beings. There is, smarter beings in the universe. There's all kinds of different stuff. One of the beings that they interacted with, one of the first ones they had, they said that she was like an intelligent entity. So basically, she could put herself wherever she wanted to be in the universe, like astral plane out there, and she could choose whether or not to take a body or, and go as a body, or she could just go in spirit or whatever. And so I think there's a possibility that there's beings that are billions of years older than us, that are way more adapted, that have insane skills that we could not even imagine out there in the universe. Think how big the universe is, and think of all the possibilities. Think of all the types of life here on Earth, and then exponentially take that outwards and think of how much life is out there. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. So one of the interesting things they had is Project Looking Glass. And they had a machine that they built that allowed them to see folds in space-time and see probabilities. So they could say, hey, if we do this, what's going to happen? If we do this, what's going to happen? So they made machines that they thought could help them look into the future. Okay, that's fact. That's in these government files. Okay. They also, seem to have some information on portals and warp drives and things of that nature. They also have a zero gravity plane, and that's already starting to come out, that they have zero gravity technology. They have some planes and different things that they can fly with zero gravity. And that's a big, big deal. Then on top of that, they say that they have 0 point energy, which means they can make energy from nothing. And so if the government is sitting on, things that don't require gas and we're all spending $4 a gallon, I think that's a major problem. And if they're sitting on this crazy amount of technology that could change the world and information about our existence and the nature of our lives, I don't think a handful of generals should be able to hold that information, right? I think that should be out in the public where people like me can look at it in the media, philosophers can look at it, scientists can look at it. I bet you if the public had the information the government has, we could advance that science more in 1 year than these generals did in 100 years, because all they think about is cage the entity, make a weapon out of it. They're not thinking about the whole breadth of what this technology could do. And that's why it has to be released into the public, So I think that's a big part of it. I think the government has been lying about contact crashes. And I think at this point, they've reverse engineered a lot of the technology. It's super important, super powerful technology. And they're clearly lying to us about it. And I don't think that's fair to humanity,
No, that makes perfect sense. How do you want to wrap this up?
I want to wrap it up by telling you something about prison planet theory. Okay, so a lot of these theories that we've just talked about, they all wrap up into one thing called prison planet theory. And it's kind of terrifying, it's kind of scary, but it also kind of makes some sense. And so the government was involved in doing like psychics where they had people like, putting themselves on different planes and checking out things in Russia and different stuff. And so they had a lot of 20-year psychic program, and now it's a black ops program. So the government has had a lot of success with dealing with people that could meditate and basically put themselves in someplace else and kind of see what was happening. And they did a lot of tests around it. And when they used these guys to test prison planet theory, they came back that prison planet theory is true. Prison planet theory was originally told to us from one of the first aliens that we had, basically that we made contact with. And then it was also backed up by a third study that they did. So 3 different studies have come back to support what I'm about to tell you, which is called prison planet theory. It goes like this. This is fucking nuts, okay? So the first alien supposedly that they had contact with, she spoke telepathically. And one of the people that she liked to contact with was her nurse. And so she told a lot of stuff to her nurse, and her nurse told us some stuff and didn't tell us different stuff. And one of the first things that she told the nurse was she was talking about humans and this and that in our life. And the alien told us that that she basically was a being that was from another planet and was able to occupy this little gray alien body and come down here to kind of see what's going on. Like that was her mission, right? And she'd been traveling a long time to do this and whatnot. And so in talking to her, what she told us is that we don't understand our own reality and that we're actually a prison planet. And what she said by that is this. that basically everyone in the universe can pretty much fly around like she did. We're all basically, ever living, spiritual kind of beings, like a super intelligence can float around the universe and go wherever we want to go. But the ones that are on Earth have been captured and put here because we're political dissidents, politicians, artists, and basically what she said is that the universe was ruled primarily by an empire, and the empire was very negative, a reptilian empire, I think they suggest, which is advanced reptilians. You've probably seen those, and they ran the thing with an iron fist, and anybody who didn't support them or spoke up, they put on the prison planet, which is Earth, which is at the side of basically like the known like universe that everybody else operates in. Okay, and so what happens is once you're placed on Earth and you die, then you go and you see the light, and the light is actually fake, and the light takes you in, you have a quick life review, and then they put you back in another human body. And then most of us here have lived thousands of years on here, and we never get to graduate to our higher self, because when we do die and our spirit should take off and we'd be able to traverse the universe and all that with the rest of the spirits, we're intentionally captured and brought back to Earth to live another life. What's crazy about this story is, one, they've tested it. They sent out the guys the psychics, and they said, hey, what do you see when a spirit dies? What do you see? And they saw like the net that tracked everybody, like a digital net around the planet. And they saw the points, like the nodes that collected the souls. And they saw the whole operation, these psychics, right? And then they had the alien tell us, then they had the psychic test, and then they did another test. I can't really remember exactly how it was, because it's just such a wild theory. And they all came back to support pieces of this prison planet theory. And then also UVA and big colleges have gotten involved now, and they've started testing this stuff. And what they found is when they talk to like young kids, they can remember past lives. They can remember having their memory reset. They can remember all the stuff. And I honestly, as a child, personally remember thinking that you lived as like lots of different lives. That's what I thought before religion imprinted on me. And I remembered a system kind of just like what this system is explaining. And if you look at the comments online, when people hear the prison planet theory, that you die, you see the light, there's a life review, and then you're forced back into another human body, it really hits home with people. And people will leave these crazy comments on any articles like this, like, I remember this is how I think things are, this is an important article, people need to read this. It's very interesting how people react to the prison planet theory. It hits home for them, and I think that's very fascinating too. So what I'm suggesting is there's the possibility that when you die, your spirit is reincarnated here on Earth, not as a blessing, but as a punishment.
And thus the term prison planet, folks. Earth is a prison.
Yeah.
I highly advise, I was not familiar with that topic. Patrick let me know about it. I started reading up on it. Very fascinating. Ties in with the aliens. But just as a theory alone, aliens or not, the whole theory of it is actually really fascinating. And there's actually a tremendous amount written about it. And there's a tremendous amount of YouTube videos about it, and a tremendous amount of Reddit posts about it. So this is not like a total fly-by-night theory. This is actually something that's gotten tremendous discussion. And I think it was very, very enlightening and fascinating, whether you believe it or not, to look into the prison planet theory, down to one thing that Patrick didn't mention that I thought was very fascinating, was down to the actual gravitational pull, which is specifically done to pull you down, and you are not going anywhere. So even down to the science of gravity, which we've always tinkered around with, everybody knows, whether it's Einstein or even modern day anti-gravitational things, and in space everything's floating, whatever. So we know how important gravity is and what gravity really does. Especially if you're fat, and especially if you ever notice how light you are in a swimming pool. Gravity's a really interesting subject in and of itself. We've gone very, very long on here. I don't know if you have any final comments to make.
Well, I'll just say this.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, so just imagine that, you die and you go and you have a life review, and then your memory is wiped, and then you come back here to Earth. It would be a great way to kind of sustain people. And there's two theories on it. The one theory is that they do it because there's a lot of pain and suffering on Earth, and that human emotion creates energy, and there other beings from other dimensions are able to see and harvest in that energy and are attracted to that energy. And then the other theory is this one where there's an empire and it's been has us in prison. But what I want to add on to it is they've gone so far is what the story from these aliens is even deeper than this. It's a wild story. So what they say is there's a war and that there's another group of people called the Domain, which is kind of like your revolutionaries. And the Domain now controls 1/3 of the universe. And the Domain sent a brigade to basically free us from this prison planet, which is either now still kind of like running on AI, like automatically. Like they've taken over most of the universe, the good guys, but we're still stuck on this prison planet, and they're not sure how to let us out, how to get us out. But they sent a brigade to help with that process, and the brigade ended up dying, was captured here, died here, and now they're stuck in the process as well. So that's why they're afraid to help us, and they're called the Last Brigade. Or the Lost Brigade. So what these, it's a wild story, because not only are they saying that we're on a prison planet and everything that entails, but that there's these groups out there, they're warring, they've tried to help us, they've lost people trying to help us. And it's a very, very fascinating read if you want to go down that rabbit hole. The wild part is that our government has spent a lot of money investigating all of these things. And I think that's the scariest part, because if the government's investigating it, it makes me think that there was some shred, at least, of truth to this, or there was something that made them interested in it. And I think just that alone is pretty scary.
Folks, at the end of the day, I think it's very naive to think that we're the only beings, whether it's another galaxy, another frontier, another universe, another portal, however you want to put it. I think it makes a lot of sense that there are other beings. I pretty much would challenge anybody that would think that that's just not possible. I think everything we discussed today and what Patrick's gone over has only furthered anyone that should maybe believe in this further. Do your own research. But at the end of the day, I think there's a tremendous amount going on. Keep in mind, as we close this subject, Area 51, that everyone's familiar with. What is it, New Mexico, I believe? Area 51, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty much, not only is it extremely, extremely secure, you will be shot on sight. If you trespass on Area 51, they shoot to kill. I don't think that's a coincidence. If they don't even do that at the White House. Okay. I mean, all jokes aside, they don't do that at the Capitol. They don't do that anywhere in the United States, as far as I know, that it is a shoot to kill scenario if you tinker around there, but they do at Area 51. And I'll let you decide and figure out why that is. So on that note,
that's it. We'll do more aliens soon. That was a fun one.
Yeah, this was great. SFL.media. This was a long one. We're going to chop it up for you. Don't worry. If you can't handle long form, if you're somebody who absolutely, only could watch things in 3-minute intervals, we got you. We'll do that. Patrick's very knowledgeable about this. I have no problem letting him wax poetic, as they say. Really cool subject. And we'll get to some other ones. That's okay. We'll hit you back with some other stuff. But signing off from now, and Anunnaki, Anunniki. Take it easy, folks.